Hi, it's TWD is back at you for another video. This is going to be another Q&A video. It's going to be my Q&A number 7. It's going to include questions from The Walking Dead show and The Walking Dead comic book. Before we get started, just make sure you're caught up with both the show and the comic book, because obviously I'm going to be talking about the comic book and the TV show and answering questions, and I may be spoiling some things for you if you're not caught up. So make sure you're caught up before you watch this. So let's start with show questions. The first question comes from TheBlackAntihero, and he asks, how do you think the death of the Lucille victim will affect Rick going forward? I think the Lucille victim's death is going to affect Rick the most, and here's why. I think deep inside, Rick is going to feel responsible for the death because he's going to think that he let his group down and that he wasn't a good leader. And the bad decisions that he made put them in the situation they were in and basically cost the Lucille victim their life. The decision I'm talking about is when they went to the compound and slaughtered a bunch of the Savior's men in their sleep. Because if they didn't do that, the Saviors wouldn't really have any idea that they even attacked. Now, of course, they were going to find them sooner or later, but I think Rick making that decision and doing that kind of pushed them over the edge and made Negan put an extra effort to find them and to teach them a lesson. So I think after the death, Rick is going to find it very difficult to keep his anger inside and to act rationally. It's going to hit him the hardest in the group, the death. But I think there are people close to him, specifically Michonne, who can help him and point him in the right direction and help him see his way through and act rationally, find the right moment to take revenge and to basically avenge the death of the Lucille victim and also Denise as well. But that's a very good question from TheBlackAntihero. The next question comes from Stephen Moraga, and he asks, do you think All Out War will be a half a season or a full season? So if you've been watching my videos, you know when I think All Out War is going to be. I think All Out War is going to be in Season 8. So we're going to see March to War in the second half of Season 7. Of course, the first half being the repercussions of the death and getting introduced to the kingdom and as well to the sanctuary, which is Negan's community. But the second half is going to be March to War, which means that starting from Season 8, we're going to see All Out War. Now, I think All Out War is going to be one full season. And it just makes sense because there's a lot of material that they have to cover during All Out War Part 1 and Part 2, which means that it's not going to be very difficult for them to fit the whole story for All Out War Part 1 into the first half and Part 2 in the second half. Now, the first half of Season 8 is going to end when All Out War Part 1 ends. So I'm going to talk a little about the comics and what happens in the comics. So here's a little spoiler warning for you. And this spoiler warning is for TV show only fans. So at the end of All Out War Part 1, we see Negan attack Alexandria and basically burn it to the ground. And then he goes to leave. And I remember Dwight asking him, why are you leaving? And he says that, I burned this place to the ground. They have nowhere to go and we're the winners. So that's where I think it should be. I think the mid-season finale of Season 8 should be Negan basically saying that we won and giving the audience the impression that Negan and the Saviors have won All Out War. Now, obviously for comic readers, we know what's coming, but it's a great cliffhanger for non-comic readers. So it's going to be a great moment for a mid-season finale. And then the finale of Season 8, in my opinion, is the epic showdown between Negan and Rick. Rick beats Negan, basically wins the war against the Saviors, and puts Negan in jail. So I think that should be the end of Season 8. So to answer the question, yes, I think it's going to be a full season. And I think each part of the war has enough story for it to be a full half season by itself. But that's a great question. The next question comes from Mason Free, and he asks, whose Lucille death would affect you as a fan the most? And he actually goes on to explain whose death he feels most affected by and giving his reasons and his opinion. So as far as my opinions, I think to me, the person that I would be shattered to see die would be someone like, and I'm not even thinking about the story and if it's going to move the story forward or not. I'm just thinking about whose death is going to hit me as a fan the most. And in my opinion, my head goes to first Maggie, because of course she's pregnant, and Carl second, because he's a kid. Now, obviously, if you watch one of my previous videos, you know that I don't think any of them should die because it's not going to move the story forward. But the question is, who would I be most affected by? And the answer is probably Maggie number 1 and Carl number 2. Coming at a close third would be probably Rick, because he's the leader. And we've been following his story from the start of the series, and it's his show. As much as it is about survival in the apocalypse, it is about Rick and where he's going to go next and what things he faces and the dangers and the things he has to do to survive. But that's a great question as well. Now we're going to move on to comic questions. Now this comic question is actually a mixture of a comic and a show question. I thought it's only appropriate to not categorize it as a show question because it does have some comic elements to it. So the question comes from OmEr KhAn, and he asks, do you think the show can pull off Carl and Lydia's relationship? The short answer is of course. I don't see a reason why they wouldn't be able to pull it off. Now if he's referring to Chandler Riggs as Carl and whether or not he could pull it off, that's an entirely different question. But what I get from this question is asking basically if the show can pull off Carl and Lydia's relationship when it comes. And in my opinion, they can definitely do it. There's nothing stopping them from doing it. And we've already seen them concentrate on Carl and his friendship / relationship with Enid and of course Sophia. So we've seen elements of that in the show anyway. But with Lydia, I think we're going to see that full force and we're going to see that at an entirely different level. But that's a very good question. The last question is actually a channel question, and it comes from First Middle Last, and they ask, will you cover the Walking Dead video games? Now, I've seen a lot of YouTubers do that, but it's just not my thing. I'm not really a gamer, and I think for one, I wouldn't be able to do it justice. So for that reason, I don't think I'm going to do it. And of course, another reason is that I don't have enough time to do it, but even if I did have time, I don't think I would do it because it's just not my thing and I'm not really a gamer. So I think it wouldn't really be interesting for people to watch me play because it's not going to be what you'd see from other YouTubers. Leave your questions in the comment section below. Make sure to put Q&A before your comment so I can find it. And I'm going to answer it in the next Q&A video, probably in a week or probably a week and a half. It's going to be when I'm going to put up my next Q&A video. But that's it for this video. Thanks for watching. I'll be back for another video.